Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here on my channel. Today I'm going to be giving you a really useful tip that I've been using to be able to get more loudness out of your tracks. Now this one is honestly really simple. It's more of like a mindset thing of like when and when not to apply something, because if you do this in, of course, the correct way, you're actually going to be able to push things further into limiters, which is probably something you might be struggling with towards the end of your tracks when you're ready for mastering. So this is incredibly useful. Before I do go ahead and explain this, I'm just going to play this little 8-bar loop so you get a feel for what we're working with here. This is actually a really old project, and it's mainly just a bass sound I was working with, and then some drums. That's honestly it, but it sounds like this. Okay, so that's what we do have to work with today. And what I'm going to be talking about is actually whether or not you should be applying a specific type of low-cut EQ to anything like a kick drum, your drum stems, anything like that. So very quickly, we're going to take a listen to our drums. You see I have nothing on it right now, and they sound like this. That's all we got there. So a common thing you might want to go and do, maybe you've heard this in tutorials somewhere, maybe it's just something you think is going to help out your mix, you might want to throw an EQ on your kick. Now, in this instance, my kick is actually merged with the rest of the drums, but just for the sake of explanation, just imagine this being a kick. Sometimes what you might do is you'll notice, when you play it, you see it hits about here, and then everything else is just kind of unnecessary below that. So you might hear like, oh, always EQ out the lows of things you don't need, and that is great advice, but when it comes to something very important like a kick, I'm going to show you why it might actually not be. So let's say we did that, you see it ends here, and we just try to cut out everything below that, so like this. So right about there is like a really aggressive example. I'm going to turn that off, and I want you to pay attention to the level of this if we look at it over here. You see it's limited from just that export, and it's right at 0. Everything is good. What happens though, when we turn on this EQ with this very steep low cut, look at that level again. Now, does it sound any different? No, I don't think so. But you're noticing when the kick hits, it's a little bit above that 0, and then when everything's hitting like the snare over there, a little bit into the loop, it's going up to like 3. That's 3 extra decibels of just volume that we do not need. There's no audible difference, and all that's going to happen with that, of course, is if you're trying to run things like into a limiter, a clipper, saturation, anything like that, it's going in that much hotter, and it's just going to sound worse. Your limiter is going to have to work extra hard to bring that down, and that's where you get like that weird artifacting when you're trying to do mastering. Like, if you push the threshold too much, and it just becomes a loud mess and doesn't sound good anymore. This is in part what might cause that. And the reason this is happening, if you know like how EQ works, it's just changing the phase like over here because, you're doing a very steep decline here. There are a couple of ways to mitigate this. Say you do actually have some strong unnecessary lows in your kick or anything for some reason that you need to get rid of. A couple of things you could do to help alleviate this. One, make it a more gentle shape here. So like I'm just using scroll wheel, you see now it's 18 dB per octave, and you move it something like this. You see that's still going above 0. It is a little bit louder than it should be, but barely compared to when it was hitting +3. Obviously, if you go over here, you're cutting out the lows, you don't want to do that. But just something like that, because you could see the difference it's making. I am using a really good EQ. Some of them might not show that too well. But we can go even more, and that's barely anything at all. But of course, the difference is going to be a lot less. So it really depends. If you have like a problematic sample, you might need to do this. Another thing you could try doing is changing the shape. You right-click on this little dot. It's not showing on the video, but choose low shelf, and then mess with it like this or something, and then... You see, that also works. Just different shapes like that instead of a very steep decline. Because when you do that, you are, of course, going to be altering the phase in a bad way. That's honestly all there is to it, though. If you apply this in practice, you'll notice your elements, whatever they may be, are actually going to be more consistent in volume. They won't go as loud, even though they're going to sound the same, meaning you could then push them further into limiters. This isn't just something for like a kick drum. This is super important on sub bass as well. You'll find this is very common. So the general takeaway from this video is, of course, you do want to be cutting unnecessary lows from elements, but when it comes to something super important like a sub bass, your kick drum, maybe go a little less on that because it will end up causing problems in your mix that you don't want to have. Anyways, that about wraps this up. I hope this video has been helpful to you. If it has, don't forget to drop a like on it to show your support, as well as subscribe for future content from me. And I will see you guys in the next video.